Hello, everyone. Happy to see you. We are happy to be here. Welcome to panel discussion titled From Anxiety to Agency, Hope as a Tool for Resilience. The discussion is organized by the Nordic Council of Ministers Office in Latvia. My name is Anneli Portman. I'm a social anthropologist. I will be moderating this discussion, and I have three outstanding speakers here, each bringing different perspectives on resilience. And I will let you introduce yourself. Let's start with you.
Yes, thank you so much, Agnes. I'm Katrine Baunvig. I'm a professor in digital humanities and cultural history at the University of Aarhus in Denmark. And I do quite a bit of collaboration with Baltic partners, for instance, at the Latvian Academy of Culture, where we do a large-scale research project on collective singing. And that's the capacity of which I am presenting here today. We dive into the cultural signature practice that collective singing is in the Scandinavian and Nordic Baltic region.
Thank you.
My name is Anneli Portman, and I come from Finland, where I work with things like comprehensive security and building resilience and what we do when all sorts of troubles come our way. I also work with prevention of youth violence and extremism, but that is probably less so what I'm going to talk about today. And you probably are all familiar with the Finnish concept of comprehensive security that views all sorts of security as something that everybody has a part to play. And so that is where I'm coming from, especially looking at things like hope or what to do with anxiety.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Tracey Mc Ardle. I am a youth and community worker. I work for an organisation called Youth Work Ireland, which is the largest youth work organisation on the island of Ireland. The project I work on is the Our Generation project, which is a cross-border, cross-community project across Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And we deliver programmes to young people around the areas of mental well-being, critical thinking skills, sexual health, gender-based violence, and community leadership as well. So that's the perspective I'm taking.
So, as you understand, the discussion will be in English. If someone needs translation to Latvian, you can get headsets over there. So, ja kādam vajadzīgs tulkojums latviešu valodā, tad austiņas tulkojumā var saņemt skatuves aizmugurē. Yes, so our aim today is to explore how anxiety can lead to agency, and how does hope help us to move from uncertainty to action. May I ask you, also the audience, please show of hands, how many of you have felt anxious about your future during the last year? Yeah, many, right? And how many of you can think of a person or a group or institutions that helped you to overcome that anxiety? Yes, some of you, but most of you not. And we see that anxiety actually is rarely something that we experience alone or that we can tackle alone. So we will also talk a lot today about social aspects of anxiety, because anxiety is not only a personal feeling, it is something that appears when the world around us feels uncertain, when we feel that our trust is broken, when we do not feel heard or included. That's why I want to emphasize that we will look upon hope as a social force. Also, of course, it's related to how we feel personally, but as a social force that not necessarily stop people or make people feel that they are paralyzed or hostages of situations, but rather moves them forward. So what does it take to move forward, to act, to make a positive change out of situations where we feel anxious or uncertain or worried about our futures? Yes, because people maybe don't act because positively, not because that this anxiety disappears, but because they feel that something stronger is present, and that something stronger that might be called hope. At least this is how I choose to interpret it before our discussion starts. So how does hope work as a social force? Let's start from there. So Our first bulk of questions would be about how we actually understand anxiety today, and maybe I start with you, Anneli. What do you see as the main drivers of anxiety today?
I think one of, which is like a physiologically rooted source, is uncertainty. Human beings are not genetically made for staying in uncertain situations for long, because we get kind of edgy, we want certainty. And that looks different on a personal level. You know, like, have you ever tried to walk on like really slippery stones in water? You know what I'm talking about? You go to the beach and they're covered in slime and you kind of try to find your balance. Well, we do that as a society as well. I've never experienced anything like what happened when Russia chose to attack completely unprovokedly Ukraine. I was in Finland at the time, and you could almost hear the sound of the entire nation turning towards NATO. Why? Because we wanted allies. When things are uncertain, you want allies. So anxiety comes from being uncertain, not knowing what to do, or when you think that you're uncertain about the outcome of what happens. I asked my very old father, are you anxious because Russia has attacked Ukraine? And he said, nah, we know how this is going to end. Wars come, wars go, they end, and we rebuild. I heard almost exact same answer from a Ukrainian fighter who had also been prisoner of war now in Russia, but is now free. And he said, when I asked, are you anxious, are you afraid? He said, nah, we can win this war. So even in an extreme situation of what would, for most of us who have grown up under peaceful circumstances, be an anxiety producing, there is this element of, nah, we can hack this.
Okay, but do you feel that the war context is the main source or reason for anxiety today? For example, if we talk about Finland, or are there also other aspects like, I don't know, economic uncertainty? Of course, it can be related, but also belonging, inclusion, about identity, value change. Just
that was a bit of a leading question, and for sure it's hard to respond with anything but a yes. But if I had to add something, I agree with everything Anneli said. An entirely different domain of from which anxiety can arise is the technological development. So as I hinted at, I come from the computational and digital humanities, and dabbling a bit with what we used to call machine learning, and that we now know as artificial intelligence. And I am particularly interested in how this technological development and the possibilities laying there are framed as something that could be causes of anxiety in societies, broadly speaking. So and for that, let's throw in social media and digital media consumption, broadly speaking, into the mix as well, leading to social isolation, physical isolation, as it were. I think that's also one of the sources, the main sources of anxiety today.
Well, thanks. Yeah, very interesting comment, and I have also experienced it myself when studying different organizations, and I feel even a risk of becoming a kind of two-speed, there's a risk that we have two-speed organizations, one part who manage to follow digitalization and artificial intelligence, and another part who can't. And yeah, so that is also a very interesting aspect. And then Tracey, working with youth, especially youngsters who have experienced violence or extremism, how would you describe manifestations of anxiety and uncertainty in that group?
Yeah, well, certainly I agree. I think that social media can exacerbate those feelings of stress and anxiety. We've all acknowledged that everybody feels stress at some point in our lives. So for us, when working with young people, it's important to acknowledge that, that you know that all feelings are valid. It's important to we call it name it to tame it. So acknowledge the feeling, but so you can progress beyond it. And with, as you mentioned there, issues around identity, growing up, those that need to feel accepted and belonging, and and we've had some recent flare-ups, shall we say, of conflict within the north. So we look at things from a trauma-informed approach. So within that, we acknowledge that those experiences don't happen in isolation. You know, there's that intersectionality of our experiences of stress, anxiety, and trauma. So we acknowledge the kind of 5 responses to fear, being the fight, flight, freeze, flop, and befriend. So acknowledging the fact that everyone, being individuals, might respond differently to different stresses in different situations. So not everybody will be stressed by the same things, and not everybody will respond in the same way. But we do find there that with those responses, they may push people away, they may act out, they may isolate themselves, all as protections for themselves to protect their own well-being. And I suppose within that, our role as youth workers is to, again, acknowledge it, but also that reassurance, providing security, providing stability, consistency, and working with them through that to provide, as we're discussing here, hope.
But it's interesting, how do you manage to come to the source of anxiety? Because sometimes when you are anxious, it's actually not easy to pinpoint what exactly it is, because it can be so overwhelming. It can be everything. And especially with young people, I mean, how do you manage it? Do you manage?
Very true, very true. Yes, so we try to relate that to the feelings in their body. So we use a big body exercise to help them identify that perhaps if they feel like knots in their stomach or they have a sore head, that might be resulting from stress or worry and anxiety, and trying to identify that for themselves and linking that to the situation that it's coming from. So through a cycle of emotions, looking at the situation, the feelings resulting, the behaviours coming from that, and then the response, and trying to, if that's a negative cycle, trying to help them identify how they can change that cycle for themselves and within themselves, and how to recognise that in others, their friends or their peers, if they're acting differently and out of character to how they normally do, as it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all, that if you're stressed, you will respond in this way, because everyone is different. So helping them to recognise that acting out of character might be a signal to that.
Well, you also touched upon social media or digital world, and it's also, of course, great context in which we feel uncertain. But then, Anneli, do I remember right that you have been doing research on political speeches and political narratives, right? So I'm curious, how do political narratives and political speeches, do they usually reduce anxiety or increase?
That is a very, very good and potentially tricky question as well. I think it depends on at what level of political speeches you look at. I looked at how the heads of states speak in my research, and there the role of a head of state is to keep things calm. So in Finland, at least, the president is above party politics, is not expected to do or get mixed with what party did that and but is expected to give a wider perspective and link what's going on with the rest of the world. Now, not all countries are equal in this. There are some countries in which the head of state gets involved in nitty-gritty daily thingies and having strong opinions and stuff. So if in those circumstances, political speeches can be very much anxiety-inducing. And of course we know that if you want to govern people, make them fearful. It's easier to govern people who are afraid. So if I was an evil ruler, I would make sure people are afraid of whatever it is I would find them convenient to be afraid of, because then they would obey me. Because I would be the one saying, I can save you guys, you know, give your vote or your money or whatever to me. But in cases of democracies, political leaders do, or political heads of states don't usually do that. They see their roles more as being kind of the spearhead of us, making us matter, promoting our interests rather than petty political party interests. But if we go one step down, I think that there's a lot of political maneuvering, trying to make sure you get most votes in the next elections, which ride on anxiety and polarization and pitting people against one another. Now, at the risk of sounding repetitive, we've also noticed that there are these digital trolls coming usually from the east of Finland, parts of the world, that flame discussions, that feed into political discussions. And when you scratch the surface, you usually find an army of trolls, but whether they be digital or human. But they fuel, they try to push us into anxiety and push us against one another.
Yeah, looking at all these perspectives, Katrine, now I'm looking at you. Well, in general, what does this tell us about society today? Can we say that anxiety is some kind of signal that points to what we need to pay attention to in society? We can use anxiety as a learning process, maybe?
Yeah, at least that is what I do as a historian, looking at sort of long periods of time, longue durée, as we call it in the historical studies, where I trace very large digital data sets for anxiety and for solutions, for resolutions of that anxiety. At the moment, I'm very interested in collective singing, as I indicated, in the Nordic-Baltic region, where we can see the interest, or sort of the go-to cultural practice in times of social crisis is collective singing. And you all know about the singing revolution. You might not know about the singing resistance in Denmark and Norway during the Second World War, where Danes and Norwegians expressed opposition peacefully towards the German by singing in protest over a course of time. And we saw the same spurring up in Norway after the Utøya event, the terror event, some years back. We also dive into the response to COVID, being singing online all over the region. And I could go on throwing examples at you. So what we see is that when anxiety, and you have to, as a digital historian, you have to sort of operationalize, how do you measure anxiety in a large body of text, public text, such as, for instance, newspapers. You do that by, for instance, looking to super simple signals such as exclamation marks. But you could also go at it more directly with a sort of an armature of terms that you're interested in. Furthermore, you could go by it subsemantically and be interested in detecting whether or not measured up against itself does change in the body of text appear rapidly. And we saw that, for instance, during the corona lockdowns, a sudden, very, very sudden change in the information stream being condensed into everything just focusing on COVID. And the sort of, when the information span narrows down, that is in itself a signal of public anxiety. So that is what I'm measuring with all the computational power I can get my hands off, thanks to Finland and the Lumi supercomputer. So that would be ways to actually operationalize anxiety as a signal. And what I see is that typically that sort of signal of anxiety spills over in a need for paths out of that anxiety. So we see following anxiety in the media and a need for talking about what is culturally sort of rooting us together. And collective singing seems to have that, to facilitate that in the region that we inhabit.
Yeah, well, I don't want to stereotype Latvians, but I have an impression that Latvians really majority love singing, and that we can imagine what we talk about when we mention collective singing, because we have this song and dance festival with more than 100 years of history, where thousands of people come together singing, and it really gives you a kind of collective, unbelievable power or a sense of belonging and sense of resilience. Almost despite of what's happening around, people are joining and singing together. And also personally, because I think it would be nice if we could also relate this discussion to our personal feelings. How do we feel? Not only about singing, but also about hope, how we make it tangible in our everyday lives. But once we have started to talk about singing, also myself, I come from a family with a very strong singing traditions. And I have to admit that I truly feel that singing of specific songs gives me a strong sense of belonging to my family, to the region where I come from, to my previous generations, and it really makes me feel that it's something larger than myself. So maybe you have some examples from your context. What is something similar experience, organization, community, practice that creates this feeling of belonging and that you matter, that you are part of something large and collective that is extremely powerful? Who would like to answer first?
Yeah, I agree. Collective action is a really powerful tool for creating hope and igniting hope. So within Youth Work Ireland, firstly, we have an initiative, Youth Work for All, that no matter where you are or who you are on the island of Ireland, that there is an opportunity for you to engage in youth services in whatever interest you may have. So that accessibility, I think, is really important, first of all, because we work across a lot of rural communities, and that rural isolation can be, kind of a factor to address in terms of feeling engaged and a part of something bigger. We deliver a program called Rise Up, in which we explore 3 aspects of identity. So firstly, looking at personal identity, because a lot of people don't know necessarily who they are, but they know who they're not. So they find themselves in opposition to something. So but we find that it's very important to explore personal values, interests, and such as that, and skills through personal identity. Then we look at group identity and how we can work together. And then we look at community identity. Firstly, exploring what community is, as it means different things to different people. And then through that, the young people explore what they feel to be the strengths of their community and also areas for improvement, because there are always room for improvement. So through that, then they identify a project that they can do together, a collective action to benefit and enhance their community. So examples similarly there with the creative aspect. I delivered this project recently in the Gaeltacht area, the Irish-speaking area of Donegal, and they chose to create a ceilidh, so traditional Irish dancing for older people in the community, create an event around that with traditional singing and speaking in the native Irish as well, to promote that cultural aspect and as an intergenerational engagement with them as young people and with older people in the community.
Yeah, well, interesting. What about Finland, Anneli? Do you have some contexts that have this collective power?
I was trying to think, and I was kind of fervently wishing I was Latvian so I could talk about, people coming together and singing. I don't think we really do that. But then I started to think about that I think it works. I'm talking with my hands, I'm sorry. Put it away. I started to think that I think it goes down to kind of more local expressions. I don't know how you celebrate Midsummer Eve here, do you?
Yes.
Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. Every single Finn has this stereotype of being beside a lake and a great bonfire. So that is kind of like you feel a collective bonfire gathering, even though obviously you can't see everybody else because like everybody is on their own little island or own little lake. But that is something you would recognize as, yes, this is something we do together. I used to work for the city of Helsinki, our capital, and they came up with what I thought was a genius idea. So they have this participatory budgeting. Everybody who's above 12 years of age can vote for a project they want realized. They can first of all make propositions, we want a skate park, or we want, more trees, or whatever it is, and then everybody gets to vote. So you teach people as young as 12 years of age, and they do the voting in school so you can't escape, that actually your vote matters. So you become part of something which is larger than yourself, because the project will not just benefit you and your gang, but it will benefit others. So that, I think, is something that, as an idea, I hope would spread more, because it takes us back to agency and takes us back to what Tracey was saying, where community and doing something for somebody else matters and becomes part of our identity. That it's not just I, me, and myself, but it's us.
Yes, and this is where social part of hope comes in, right? Well, very nice also about midsummer celebrations. This is also something that Latvians can relate easily with. And Katrine, do you want to add something about singing? You have done research on this singing traditions for more than 100 years back in history, right?
You can't stop me. No, but I think I would like to just take a step back and just take a brief glance at what hope actually is, at least to me. So it's logically speaking in the Northern European languages, including English, hope sort of covers, it cannot be reduced to sort of the face value of banal or sheer optimism. That might be sort of the first thing in mind. Semantically, it's much richer. It ties in with trust and reliance for each and every one of these languages. It's rooted in those types of phenomena, and perhaps first and foremost in warranted expectations for something better, perhaps not good, but something better to happen, and sort of trusting the future in that sense. And for me, what I see as an historian, that trust or that hope is rooted in cultural literacy. And by that I mean knowing the world one inhabits and knowing sort of the cultural repertoire of that world, not feeling alienated when people burst into singing. Actually having command of the language and the repertoire that in which the collective traditions sort of develop and express themselves. So for me, it's also in this discussion. No, first you asked me where do I see it, where do I personally experience it. So I'm biased and looking to collective singing. So I see it when I go to my children's school and hearing them join in a choir and rehearsing some song from the Danish collective tradition. I might add, Danish collective singing or communal singing is something very very different from what goes on in the Baltics. I won't dive into that, but it sounds so... Okay, let me see. The level of aesthetic ambition in Denmark is much lower than what you have going on here. But nevertheless, it gives me hope to hear them sing very poorly songs from the Danish past. Also, as part of this large research project on collective singing in the entire region, we have a case study going on in Denmark and in Lithuania following Ukrainian refugees and choirs in which they sort of go to their cultural tradition in a time of diaspora, in displacement and seeking at least comfort in repeating or rooting the difficult situation that they are in their cultural tradition. And if I might add, the complex thing here is that cultural traditions, cultural literacy, rootedness is also a burden. So being confronted with your past from Ukraine and perhaps songs taking you back to your childhood is not necessarily an easy and comforting task, but it might be it might give hope, even though it's a complex and difficult feeling.
Yeah, well,
that was a lot of things.
Yeah. No, what I'm thinking now is the relation between individual responsibility for resilience and being strong, and then the collective or social responsibility. So if we would, well, it would be interesting to discuss further whether maybe we put too much responsibility on individuals, telling them you have to be stronger, you have to be resilient, you have to adapt.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what is the role of society? What is the role of community? Is the role of trust? The importance of feelings that you matter, that your voice is heard. Also, when you talked about elections, right? So how can we move this concept and understanding of hope and resilience from individual level to like community or social level? Do you have any ideas on that? Let's start with you, Anneli.
Well, coming from the position of being a civil servant, so working for the government, I think anyone working for the government or the municipalities has a great responsibility, because in the end we are the face of, quote unquote, the state. And so if we treat people kindly and with fairness and listen to their real problems and are accessible, that will boost societal trust, and that will boost, even in situations that go completely haywire, the sense that there is the possibility of having your personal concerns being taken seriously. So that's why it is super important, no matter what kind of crisis we have, to have medical services, have social services, have, food distribution, water distribution working, so that we know that we don't ignore people's real needs. And I think that is something that, as a civil servant, I think it's really, really important. We saw this in times of COVID, that it's really important to listen to people's anxiety. What is it that worries you? Tell me, and take that seriously. Even if you don't have the answer, even if you don't have a magical wand to make COVID go away, poof, overnight. No, we didn't have that. But we could listen and we could answer and we could provide help when help is needed. And so I think that, two things everyone can do from whichever level is be kind and be fair. And that in itself builds both hope and trust and more stable societies and nicer places to live.
Yes, so in everyday life, how can you know? How can you feel that the system is fair?
When you get timely help. One of the according to research, if you look at organizational justice, one of the components of justice is how quickly do you get an answer? If I'm a juvenile delinquent, I've done something bad, and I have to wait for 2 years till I get a sentence, it's way too long. Like, life is over in 2 years when you're 13 or 15. You can't, so you need things to happen at the right time. So you cannot wait. Or if you're an elderly person and you have to wait 6 months till you can see a doctor, it's simply, it can't be that way and still feel fair. So one component of fairness is to get timely help, to be heard on time.
Yes, thank you for that. Thinking about you, Tracey, when youngsters feel that nobody listens to them, what turns the feeling from nobody listens to me to I can actually do something? What is needed in that process?
Yeah, that's a key aspect. Everybody wants to be seen and to be heard and to be respected. So choice and empowerment are really important for hope. So it's for young people to be empowered to make their own decisions, to feel like to acknowledge their feelings, to feel like they're listened to. A lot of stress and anxiety comes from fear of the unknown and fear of things that are perhaps out of our control. So focusing on what is within our control, what can be done, what are practical and tangible steps that can be taken moving forward, and allowing people the choice to make those for themselves, I think is important. Within that, it reduces that fear, reduces that anxiety. Within the Irish language, when we speak of feelings, we don't speak of feelings being like, I am tired. We said that tiredness is upon me. So it's a temporary state of mind, you know, that this too shall pass. We can move beyond it and we can move forward. But acknowledging it and hearing it and respecting it is part of that.
Yeah, well, this makes me think whether we can expect that people develop agency without first experiencing that they matter. Maybe a philosophical question, but at least what I hear, that when you feel that you matter, then it's much more easier to act.
Yeah, I think so. I would agree with that, because you're acknowledging you as a person and your own experiences, your own opinions and decisions. I think that's important for you to acknowledge what, as you said, your agency, what you can do, what is within your power. Yeah, I agree.
Yes, Katrine?
So, if I might add or complicate the matter a bit, so actually I think a lot of the problems that individuals face when pertaining to anxiety has to do with the very complex historical process of individualization, and pointing to the fact that the place where we find comfort is perhaps not in amplifying the individual and the way that we as individual matters. It might be when we take comfort in the fact that we are not that important. We as one single person, we are not that important. We're just part of something greater, robust, and trusting. In this region that we all inhabit, I feel that trust is something that we share as a common value. And that at least is what I take from my studies in the collective singing traditions, that is what a large proportion of partakers in collective singing finds, that sort of sense of belonging and immersing themselves into a body of that is something transcending them as individuals, and that is really nice and really comforting. And I would like to add, some people do not, emphatically not find that feeling. They tend to not cherish the activity as much as the majority, but the majority does that.
Okay, thanks. I see Anneli is eager to add something.
I've recently moved to a very, very old house, and it's in a small village. And the first time I went to the medieval church that is in that village, all of a sudden I looked at the stones and I'm thinking, there have been hundreds and hundreds of years of people who have lived and died and cried and sung and prayed in this place. So I found exactly what you were saying, that my teeny tiny life all of a sudden was part of a very, very long continuum. And I thought, this ties in with what I've been, researching and talking about, of how one aspect of hope is knowing your history. So, why do we like to listen to people's stories of how I overcame, I don't know, whatever it is, not having water or, raising toddlers or, stuff that aggravates us? It's because
Teens and toddlers in the same mix.
And so I think that there's great value in learning history, learning where we come from, learning how it has been done before. I just listened to this radio program. They were talking of, have you ever heard of the year 536? Anyone? There were at least two, maybe three, major volcanoes that erupted, and the entire humanity survived 3 years of winter. We survived. We can do it again. Yay! So it's that kind of things we need to know in order to have hope, and in order to know that my teeny, teeny, tiny life is connected to a long continuum of survivors. We're still here. Woohoo!
Oh, this one actually I liked, because usually when we think about hope, at least when I hope for something, you look into future and you believe that you might have some possibilities. You have to always look for possibilities. But then looking back in history, and that was actually a very interesting point. Yes, thank you for that. You wanted to add something also, Tracey?
Just on your point about removing the individual aspect, I think there's still somewhat of a taboo when we speak of mental well-being and things like this. So having the conversations and acknowledging, yes, I felt that way, for others to say, I have also felt that way, and removing the individual aspect from that it is, and normalizing the experience and the conversations around it, can help more of a community approach rather than an individualistic approach. Yeah.
Maybe we could talk a little bit more about how to find inner peace in a very anxious world. Do you have some experience to share? Because you already mentioned, Anneli, about your house. It is also, I feel that there is some kind of inner peace when you arrive to that house. But is there something else? Well, how can people find inner peace in this very anxious world? Because from one side we have community, we have society, we have history, we have organizations, but at the end of the day we are still also individuals, and we want to be in peace with ourselves. Any ideas? Any experiences?
We look at the 5 ways to well-being. So the 5 ways to well-being being connection, so connecting with others in whatever way that may be it like another person or a group of individuals, and that shared experience or shared time. So connection, being active in whatever way that may be, could be singing, dancing, walking, however it may be. Serotonin and the regulation of sleep. Volunteering, so doing something for others without expecting something in return. Taking notice, so in regards to the senses, say for example, eating your favourite food, watching your favourite movie, and keeping learning, so continuing to challenge yourself in whatever way that may be. So Sudoku, however, or something else. So keeping your brain active and your brain and your body active.
Okay, Anneli?
I think if you look at the studies on hope, they are also connected to theology. So regardless of what your personal concept to God is, there is an aspect of hope and an aspect of inner peace that transcends us. So there is a sense of rootedness. So a lot of people, for instance, in very stressful situations, would pray or or find a way to connect with God in a way that is meaningful to them, and then maybe connect to others who think similarly. I think that in the past, while Finns were never as good at singing as Latvians are, and I'm very sorry for that, but we are not. For instance, in every crisis situation, we've collectively been singing a Lutheran hymn, "A Mighty Fortress is Our God." So when the delegation went to Russia and to negotiate the end of the Second World War, our front of it, the people who sent them off in the train were at the platform singing, "Our God is a mighty fortress is our God." So there is a connection that we have to make that connects inner peace with the rest of the universe. How you do it is up to you. Some of us pray, some of us do something else.
Yeah, for sure. There's a ritual component to producing inner peace. But what you both of you point to is that it, for lack of, I'm very, pardon my French, but what both of you invite for is to stop mind-fucking yourself and sort of do something instead. So for me personally, long walks are very beneficiary, and that ties well in with what you indicated, Anneli, because pilgrimage and long walks as a spiritual activities has such a long and deep-rooted history, at least in the Christian tradition, but you can see it also in the Buddhist. So that the ritual component to inducing hope, creating inner peace, what have we? That is very well articulated in the cultural repertoires in which we all live.
I would also add, like you were saying about sleeping, I think we are all miserable if we haven't slept or haven't eaten or haven't gone to the toilet. So, do normal things, do things that, underline that you're a human being instead of a super being.
Yeah, straight to the point. What about you? There are many people sitting here. Can you mention one activity, one community, one tradition that gives you strength when you feel worried or uncertain about future? Any experiences? One experience, one tradition or community or a thought? Yes? Rekur ir meitene ar roku augšā.
Walking in forest and connection with nature in all aspects.
Okay, so it's rather individual than collective. Okay, other ideas? What do you do? Yes?
Eating together. Yeah? This is a very interesting part of the Nordic culture tradition.
Mm-hmm. And even cooking together as well as part of that. Yeah.
Okay, another hand?
In everyday life, finding an answer of a sentence, every man has to serve. That means I'm asking myself, what are the things I am serving, giving to society, helping someone, what is my value, and how we are connected.
Okay, it's about being useful, it's about being resource for others, it's about feelings that you matter for others. So it's a collective form of hope and strength, right? Yes, okay. And I can ask maybe also a question in a different way. It can be like a one-word exercise. What is one thing that right now gives you hope? One word, what gives you hope right now? Can you think of anything? Or everything is hopeless?
Lampa.
Yes, one word.
Nature.
Great.
Okay,
yes.
Can I add? I was going to say standing barefooted on a lawn, connecting with nature. Yeah.
One thing that gives me hope is Lampa. This is such a genius idea to come together to talk and listen. Like, yay! Hope for humanity.
Yes, yes. And again,
Spread this
collective
to other
strength,
places.
talking to each other, seeing each other, hearing other, right? We are a part of something. Yes, do you have one word for hope? What makes you
I'd also said Lampa, but yeah, one word. One word. Future. Just future planning, future goals. Goals. We'll say goals.
Yeah. Okay, now we have some 10 minutes left in our discussion, and I still have many questions, but maybe someone have questions to speakers? Raise your hand if someone has a question. Yeah.
I was very intrigued by what you said about this individualism and that we kind of have to go out of it more. And I somewhat feel that this century that we live in is actually very like self-centered and very much individualistic. So maybe I would like to hear more comments from you on this topic, and maybe especially for youth, like how to actually learn to build those connections and kind of step out of yourself more.
Yeah, okay, you're asking an historian, so I don't have sort of life advice other than what I've built in my own mess of a life. But what I do see as through my studies of sort of public discourse throughout the last 250 years in this region is that we increasingly center discourse on the individual, and we emotionalize the way we sort of engage with the world. So with it, I don't know if you can recognize this, but at least in Danish, within the last 10 to 15 years, verbs that present an opinion or is used in order to for you to express the opinion that you hold is increasingly emotionalized. So we do not any longer say, or at least the younger generations tend to say I feel when they mean, or at least the elder generation would think that they meant I think, I am of the opinion that, and the rooting of each and every one of your thoughts in an emotional experience, I think, is actually quite stressful. And this is just me observing my contemporaries. This is not something that I've done actual research on. And this is also me being a mother of 3 young men, ranging the age from 16 to 22, and throw in a toddler in the mix. But I see that they are in a completely different way than I did as a young person, struggling with rooting every experience in what they feel about the world. And that is burdensome. And what then you ask for ways out of that, ways out of yourself. As my background is actually in the history of religions, so I have delved quite a bit into rituals as a phenomenon, and that seems for me to be sort of the universal response within communities for individuals to leave themselves. And collective singing is a cultural ritual that is deeply rooted within our region. It sprung out from a religious practice, and it could in many ways be seen as a secularized hymnal activity. And if one has sort of the command over the repertoire of these songs, that is a way to sort of find a relief from the everyday life within your brain. I don't know if this is an answer, but it was at least an attempt at one.
Anneli, you wanted to add something?
From the work I do with youth, especially with youth who have had it quite difficult in life, one of the things that can be done is introduce sports, but not like individual sports, but like get a football club or basketball or whatever it is you do, because there your contribution is vital, but the focus is not just on you and your performance. Maybe at the exclusion now of Norwegians, and I'm very sorry, Holland? You know. Yeah, we do have these individuals who get all the attention, but I think that is one of the things that also we as a society can do, is to make sure that every single young person has access to some sort of sports that is affordable. Because one of the problems is that if it's only the rich who can do it, then what about the other youth? So a way to get out of yourself is to do something together with others, and sports can be a great way.
Yeah, and it's again the participation, being a part of something, right?
Yeah.
Yes?
And it ties very well in with the ideas about how can I serve you guys, my common fellow men and women and non-binary persons. How can I serve you guys? And for me, that the concept covering all this is cultural literacy. Do I have command over the culture that I am in? And some people don't. And that is what we need to focus on if we want to build robust individuals, I think. People who are very deeply rooted in the community that they are part of.
Okay, Tracey, and your tips for the youth?
I agree, yeah, and also as well as those points, critical thinking skills. So we're kind of oversaturated with so much information and so much going on. So skills in sort of discerning what is fact and what is opinion. You know, who is benefiting from us thinking a certain thing, believing a certain narrative. So, critically analysing the kind of information that we receive. And, and as well as sports being an amazing opportunity, engaging in any way, in any kind of role, be it singing, dancing, whatever. And I think the common theme there being, as the lady in the audience mentioned, having a purpose. So not everybody in life has the same purpose, but we all have we all have a role, we all have something to contribute. So identifying that for ourselves, that we can, you know, we can complement each other's skills and experiences by working together.
Yeah. Well, our time is almost up, so maybe let me conclude while summing up. We started with anxiety today, this discussion, but we repeatedly came back to topics of trust, fairness, belonging, recognition, participation, relationships, and maybe the three most important conclusions are the importance of feeling that I belong, I matter, and I can make a difference. So maybe, at least from my point of view, I heard that we can't avoid thinking about these aspects when we talk about how to transform anxiety into resilience through hope. So that would be my conclusion. And thank you, Nordic Council Minister's Office in Latvia, for organizing. Thank you, Anneli Portman, Katrine Baunvig, Tracey Mc Ardle for discussion. And just the last comment for each of you, if you can just finish the sentence, hope become real when we
act,
sing together,
have purpose.
Perfect. Thank you so much.